South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham indicating this week that he intends to sue the DOJ over Arctic frost. That's the investigation that included him and several other prominent Republican lawmakers.
Now, you may remember that investigation apparently pulled phone records from nearly a dozen Republicans on the Hill as part of former special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the January 6th Capitol riot. Take a listen to what Graham said on Sean Hannity's show.
I think this was worse than Watergate, an effort to destroy President Trump, charge him with crimes that are just ridiculous, and come after people like me. I'm not going to put up with this crap anymore. I'm going to sue. I'm going to sue the hell out of these people.
How much are you going to sue them for?
Tens of millions of dollars. I'm going to sue. If you don't sue, they'll keep doing it. Don't run away from this, Republicans. Fight back.
That promise from Graham came just hours before the House unanimously moved to repeal a provision in the recent government spending bill that would allow senators to sue the DOJ for $500,000 if their phone records are seized without their knowledge in the future.
Now, according to CNN, several of the senators whose phone records were seized in Arctic frost spoke out against it, with Missouri Senator Josh Hawley calling it, quote, a bad idea. And continuing, quote, I'm all for accountability, don't get me wrong, but I think taking taxpayer money is not the way to do it. The way to do it is tough oversight.
In addition to pushback from his Senate colleagues, Graham's outrage didn't seem to sit well with some conservatives outside of Congress who saw it as actually hypocritical. Former Michigan Representative Justin Amash, writing on X, Lindsey Graham has repeatedly defended, promoted, and voted for the unlawful warrantless surveillance of millions of Americans via the Patriot Act, FISA 702, and other unconstitutional programs.
And Brian Tyler Cohen also jumped on the Graham-bashing bandwagon, writing in his own post, Lindsey Graham has decided that he's entitled to tens of millions of your taxpayer dollars because he's decided he's in a special class of Americans who cannot be investigated for wrongdoing. So you think it's a good message, probably wrong messenger, or
the other Lindsey G in my life,
the other
Lindsey
LG.
Graham. I cannot echo Justin Amash's comments any more than they were on screen. I totally agree with them. Lindsey Graham has voted for, has supported, is one of the architects of the mass surveillance of the American people. So now him and his other colleagues who've been ensnared in it, they deserve this over and over again. I think it's appalling what happened in this investigation, that members of the elected members of our government were spied on by the deep state, by the bureaucrats. I think that's so wrong. They voted for it. Get rid of FISA. Get rid of the Patriot Act. Get rid of all these surveillance measures. And you're going to say the apparatus you assembled to spy on us, it spied on you, and you think because of that you're entitled to damages that the American people will pay for? That is contemptible. I agree with Josh Hawley. I don't usually. He's exactly right. There should be accountability for this program, accountability on the senators who supported it, including Lindsey Graham. They should vote to undo it. They should not make the American people pay the damages for the surveillance that they voted for. That's absurd. That's offensive. It's ludicrous. So I'm glad that provision does not belong in any legislation. Undo these programs. These programs should go away. People like Justin Amash and Rand Paul and Thomas Massie have been warning about them, how bad they are for freedom, for liberty. For years we've been warning. Now Lindsey Graham's noticed that because he got ensnared in it.
Well, I think after January 6th, 2021,
excuse me.
Bless you, there were a lot of different...
I'm getting myself worked up.
I know, you are riled up. I think, there's a whole other side of the argument. So Jack Smith's office says that, this was part of a routine, quite legal, activity that these people were alleged to be trying to conduct efforts that were trying to overturn the
government
election.
Always says it's routine.
I know, but if we were looking at how impactful, so January 6th will go on in our history books as one of those days that forever changed the way that we look at handing over elections and how that is dealt with. It will always enhance security at our Capitol. People were affected. People died. It was an extreme event. And I think it requires extreme looking into after to see what went wrong, how to avoid it ever happening again. So
disagree on that.
We can, but I think that it's important to have that never happen again. You would agree on that, right? And so I think we need to make sure that there's accountability for potential wrongdoing. We need to make sure that there is accountability for potential wrongdoing. So if the investigation was aimed at uncovering whether laws were broken in some bigger and alleged scheme to disrupt the peaceful transition of power. And so that was what actually the investigation was about. And so they didn't continue to follow through with it under Trump's presidency, but there was warranted reason to want to look further into that and see who all was connected to it.
It was an investigation.
And just because you're
speech.
offended, just because you are offended doesn't mean that the government shouldn't do its job to make sure and deter future actors from doing anything similar.
It was an investigation into speech.
If there was any incited riots or communication that would make this a targeted intentional attack.
But it was not inside. You don't need an investigation to show what Trump said is on tape. You can watch it for yourselves, and you can decide to what extent you think he is morally complicit in what happened, and you can vote or not vote for him on this basis. The accountability is the democratic process. It's not the deep state deciding who goes to jail for speech or who you're allowed to vote for. The American people got to decide whether that. And actually, first, the Senate decided. The House impeached, and the Senate voted, and they voted to acquit him. We're a nation of laws. He got due process. They voted to acquit. You may not like that outcome. Sometimes a person who you think is guilty gets off with a crime, but he was acquitted. And then there was an additional measure of accountability, which is that he ran for president again, and he won. The American people voted for him. The American people got to decide what moral weight they assigned to him, whether they thought that was disqualifying to be president. The American people, a majority of the American people, not just a majority of the Electoral College, but a majority of the American people said, knowing that, we still choose Donald Trump instead of Kamala Harris. So what can be done?
Yeah,
At what point then do the G-men get to say, excuse me, American people, we're saying this was criminal?
You're talking about what President Trump said specifically in relation to the day January 6th, but the investigation was much deeper than that. So you're trying to just make it simple in one line, but it really was looking into the alleged illegal conduct of efforts for submitting fraudulent electoral certificates as well. That was an entire thing that we looked into as well after the 2020 election. And so make sure that there was no fraudulence happening in these states. That
they
would
were
require
looking at the draft
communication.
tweets he had on the day of
there's
during
a lot
the riot.
There's a lot
within
this investigation. And since it wasn't
I object
through,
to that part of it.
You can't just say that it was two things, that they were just looking at Trump's speech and looking at and wasting taxpayer dollars. That's not all that it was doing.
I object in the strongest possible terms to law enforcement trying to read the president's draft tweets that he was sending during the day of the riot.
Even
that
if
wasn't
some of
about,
them make him complicit in trying to overturn an election, you object
keep saying
to that.
Trying to overturn the election. What he did is express a view that he thought he had won and that votes were not being counted properly. He was incorrect about that, but expressing
Did he really believe that the votes
are
were being counted improperly, trying to strong-arm people to cooperate with him? That's a believing versus trying to bully and make somebody behave in a way that's just untrue? Okay, the votes show...
told by his advisors, Rudy Giuliani,
so then maybe those
Powell.
advisors' text message should be reviewed, and then they should, since they knew, somebody knew.
Fine, throw the book at them, sue them.
So then you would like.
I was fine with
so
Dominion should sue. They have
Jack Smith
sued.
didn't only look at Trump. He looked at his investigation was looking at everybody. So that's the whole point.
I'm objecting to an investigation into elected officials for their speech, not attorneys who made. You can be sued for defamation if his speech was defamatory. Then sue him. If Lindsey Graham's speech was defamatory, sue them. Dominion Voting Systems has sued some of these people for claims they made on Fox News. I don't know why they get to sue Fox News. Fox News didn't make the claims. The guests on the program did. Defamation law exists. I'm fine with that. This was the government, the deep state itself, trying to say that this category of speech we think was criminal. It wasn't criminal speech.
Our government has the capacity to do it, as you pointed out, because Lindsey Graham has made it so.
Well, that's true.
And so that is
true.
So now we're moving forward underneath the merits of the law, and Jack
Yes.
Smith did nothing egregious here. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
he followed the law.
I disagree with that, but the law is itself egregious and should be rewound by Lindsey Graham and others.
Comedians Bill Maher and Patton Oswalt clashed on cultural issues and the future of the Democratic Party in the most recent episode of Maher's podcast.
Oswalt, a longtime Democratic supporter, suggested that part of the reason for the political divide in the country is due to the backlash from Barack Obama being elected president, but Maher argued that the left is to blame for becoming fixated on certain progressive causes. Let's look.
This country is not as mature as it thinks it is. We elected Obama, and clearly the country freaked out. We're still living in that freak out. We are not as progressed and evolved and intelligent as we think we are because we keep freaking out about this stuff.
Well,
you know?
The left freak out too. The left freaked out about a lot of too.
What did they freak out about?
Gender, race, parenthood, schools, homelessness, crime, the border, education. Like we stopped being a scientific people.
The two also discussed Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, the New York representative has become a popular figure among younger progressives, with some hoping she'll run for president in 2028. But Maher says she's not the kind of politician Democrats should be rallying around.
If she had some deprogramming, she could be such a fantastic candidate.
What do you mean deprogramming?
Well, she just doesn't, she's never going to resonate with people outside of the bubble that she lives in the very, very far left.
Well,
And that, I mean, the New York Times, of all people, the people I've been like squabbling with for the last 7, 8, 10 years, whatever, when I was all about, Democrats have gone too far left, they just put out a huge editorial basically saying exactly what I've been saying.
what, that she's too far left?
Yes.
Maher went on to accuse Oswalt of living in a bubble similar to AOC, and others online agreed with him. Outkick writer Ian Miller says Patton Oswalt is the perfect modern no kings Democrat who has absolutely no idea what's happening around him, who has no idea how bad his political ideology is, because all he cares about is all he cares about is what his bubble makes him feel like a good person.
Now,
I read that correctly. I did my best.
Now, this is not the only recent instance of Maher being critical of the left. He also blasted New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani for the past several months, warning that his policies might hurt Democrats in future elections.
I feel like I'm going to come across as a real hater today because I had very strong language for Candace Owens, who I don't respect very much, in our past segment. And one of the, other people, on my list of 10 people I really despise,
We had talked about
Oswalt.
2 today?
Yeah, Patton Oswalt. I cannot stand that guy, and I am baffled by his success. Every time, he's like one of the only celebrities when I see that it's his voice in something, I go, oh, not this freaking guy again. He's not funny, and he's definitely not insightful. Bill Maher, I agree with everything he said in all of these clips. Patton Oswalt does live in a progressive left bubble. Patton Oswalt said vile things about Nick Sandman, one of the Covington kids. He was one of the people to pile on most aggressively, wrongly, in that case of those boys being smeared as racist that didn't do anything wrong. He recently, this just happened, he got suspended on Blue Sky or so I read, for saying that Megyn Kelly should be fed into a wood chipper. So he's a pretty deranged left-wing lunatic, and he's not funny.
So, okay, we can take the people and put them to the side, right? Well, we can take the conversation and see about that kind of stuff. Now, I think, Bill Maher was making some good points that the Democratic Party either has to lean all the way in or get out of the game. And sometimes they went way too far on social issues that proved that people didn't want them to be that forward thinking when it comes down to every single issue. Now, some of the correction was an overcorrection, but it still was stuff that needed to be corrected. Like you said with Me Too, immediately blaming everybody and saying that they're just right. But it came from and stemmed from women mostly not being believed, and a lot of cases going unchecked, a lot of people going unchecked in power for decades. And so that's why the pendulum was swung possibly too far, but somewhere in the center is where it belongs. And so I'm glad that the conversation happened and was ignited for major movements like this to shed a light on major instances like that, so that we can figure out how can we really manage cases like this in our society, where we give women the safe space to feel like they could speak out about this without being criticized and demonized and burdened with some unlimited amount of evidence, when they can just tell you the truth and their story can be believed and looked into by police and other people.
Well, it can be looked into.
Yes, I didn't say they need to be
free from criticism. No one is free from criticism.
No, but women, if you have a young daughter like I do, you want her to feel safe to even bring it up to a police officer and file the police report. But if she's not to be believed because of our patriarchal society that we usually send young girls home, take the police report, and don't even look into the person, well, then we need to make sure that that's corrected. And so even if it got overcorrected, I'm happy that the conversation was on the forefront to bring us back to center and figure out what...
Most people who take the step of actually filing a police report or contacting the police about something, because lying to the police is a crime, most people who take that step, there's a presumption that they're probably telling the truth. It is more reasonable in that case to presume that there's some underlying truth to the matter. That's different. I mean, a lot of Me Too accusations have nothing to do with the police and are like dates or encounters from 20 years ago being litigated in the media. How am I to process what happened, with Brett Kavanaugh or with Joe Biden himself? Joe Biden was accused of sexually assaulting a woman in the 80s or 90s, and people just kind of threw that one away, which I understand, because how am I supposed to know? It happened years and years ago. But for some reason, that one got tossed out, but then we make a federal case out of what again, a woman said happened to her with Brett Kavanaugh, and just as many decades ago. And how am I to know? How it was not reported to the police? What can we do?
I also think that in what they discussed in that conversation is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't understand why Bill Maher doesn't think that she is a good person to look at. He just
doesn't like her politics.
But even President Trump said, he gave her a compliment recently. I can't remember the exact compliment, but you could say that she is in touch with the youth, that she is a very charismatic person, that she is connected to voters and gets people really rallied up, more than we're seeing a lot across the Democratic Party. So shutting her down, if Bill Maher still calls himself a Democrat, I know in the past he has.
He just thinks she's too left.
Yeah, but so then have a conversation, because it's better to have her in or around the ballot talking about actual policy than to try to find some middle of the road Democrat that fails miserably. It doesn't relate to anyone. I mean, you can't play every side. That was part of the problem when people were talking about Kamala. It's like, well, historically you've taken these liberal stances and you run for president, and now you're saying you do everything for everybody in these interviews. What would you actually do? So that, and part of why President Trump won is because he just firmly was taking stances about what he would do, whether he followed through with them or not. He was taking dramatic stances, even if they align with historical Republican Party or not. He was taking stances, and that's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does. So I think allowing that space for somebody to, that's what Mamdani did, and that's why he won. Whether you agree with it or not, it's just taking these firm, bold stances that has been pushing people over the edge. I think.
But Mamdani backpedaled from his most toxic stances, including that we should defund the police, which he tweeted over and over and over.
You won't get over it.
Well, it's a crazy idea.
Okay, but we broke down what this means. We talked about the yes, Robbie. We said I'm not doing it again. Go back to any conversations that Robbie and I had about defund the police.
What it says. Well, and in this conversation Bill Maher's having with Patton Oswalt, he mentions how California was like trying to abolish the concept of gender, and Patton Oswalt's like, "What are you talking about? That never happened." And Bill Maher was like, yeah, it did. They wanted to have it so that on the birth certificate, it doesn't say, when you're born, it doesn't say if you're a boy or a girl. That's something to be decided later. And Patton Oswalt just had no awareness of that, because he's, a blue sky liberal progressive who is not aware how insane the woke extremes seem to the rest of us.
For somebody trying to create a space where kids aren't committing suicide, and scientific consensus supports that gender dysphoria is a real medical condition, and there's several ongoing conversations about this. I think that is better than losing lives.
Boy or girl?
No, I think if there's a way to avoid losing lives of kids committing suicide, we should explore it. And so that's what I'm telling you. And I think if Democrats were the first party to
the concept of gender is, I think that would be an extreme answer to a
I would love to hear.
So
instead of criticizing people that are just existing as transgender people, put policies forward that you think would make more sense. You can't ban people from feeling a way or exploring their lifestyle. Tell me what this policy is then. If you don't like the way that Democrats went about it, what is the adequate way to make sure that...
Because there is a tiny, tiny sliver of the population that does not fit neatly into the category man and woman. They exist, and I'm fine with making whatever accommodations for. I'm not saying not accommodations, but to presume that that is the default, that we're just all amorphous blobs that take form later in life, is not true. The vast 99.999% of babies that are born are boys or girls, males or females, and you can assume that and write it on the birth certificate. Not harming anyone to do that would be my answer.
And I think
if you change your mind a lot later, if you fall into that 0.01% of the population, fine by me to change it. I'm not saying transgender people don't exist. I'm saying a policy of accommodating that small number of people that also undoes gender for the vast majority of people who are slotted perfectly evenly into it the way it was, have no problem with the system, would be absurd.
Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. If you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years.
Bill Maher there slamming future New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani for embracing socialism during his campaign.
The 34-year-old mayor-elect ran on the Democratic ticket, but is a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, something that Maher suggests cannot be the future of the Democratic Party if they plan to win elections in the future.
Before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Maher says this isn't a one-off either. Take a listen to what he said next.
This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office. Gosh, if only someone had been saying that all along.
Maher did later point out that the US already has prime examples of socialist policy like Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid. But he says while those programs to, quote, soften the edges of capitalism, one of the real dangers of socialism is the woke ideology that he says comes with it. Take a listen.
The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
So what I find, I know you don't care for Bill Maher. What I find interesting about this clip is that he sounds to be like he's mostly criticizing extremely progressive left social policies, and despite socialism having the word social in it, actually the policies that are defining of socialism are mostly economic in nature rather than, right, he's criticizing wokeness, but what we call wokeness or political correctness is a newer innovation in progressive thought than socialism, which was just about economic policies. Now, maybe you can argue there's some connection, and that's kind of what he's arguing there. But now, I also think socialism is very bad. I think the Democratic Socialists of America have not demonstrated themselves to be a particularly wise or politically influential, or have grasped onto some political knowledge other than the clear success of a Bernie Sanders type figure, AOC, those people who, but they're they define socialism in just this vague way such that no one can be against it, which at that point then I'm like, well, why are you then trying to even rehabilitate the term? If what you're going to say is, by socialism, I mean some protections for workers and some welfare programs, well, yes, we have welfare. European countries have welfare, and they're not socialist countries. To me, socialism, and not just to me because it's the actual definition, socialism is a economic system, is a competitive system, an alternative system for a market economy, where the economy is centrally managed and directed by a group of, in pure socialist thought, the workers take the means of production. In practice, what that always means is some government committee plans the economy and decides how many what gets built and what factory opens and what you charge for it, and that leads to crippling poverty every single time. But it's not a market economy with welfare. That's just social democracy.
So we could have a whole debate about whether what you just described is socialism or Marxism and how those intersect, but
Marxism is nonsense. You got to agree with me on that one.
I'm not a Marxist, Rob. I'm not a Marxist,
Yes.
so let's be clear about that. But to the Bill Maher point, one of the reasons that you correctly note that he irritates me quite a lot is that his fundamental view is that whatever he happens to believe is the way forward for Democrats to win elections. In the New York mayoral election, there was a candidate espousing exactly what Bill Maher is espousing. His name was Andrew Cuomo, and he got kicked around by the voters twice, both in the Democratic primary and in the general election.
New York.
In New York, yes. But we're not, nobody is saying, like, this idea about for example, a centrally directed economy and so on. Mamdani isn't even in New York commending or advocating a centrally planned economy. He's talking about free childcare for kids 5 and under, free buses, financed by a modest increase in the corporate tax rate and an even more modest increase in the city income tax rate for people whose income is over $1 million. That obviously has support, otherwise he would not be the mayor-elect of New York City. Bill Maher also, I'm sorry to get into a rant, but he really does irk me in all sorts of ways. Bill Maher, for example, espouses and has espoused throughout the past 2 years extremely strong support for Israel and what it's doing in Gaza. Lots of people on the left and increasing numbers of people on the right are appalled by that. It is an unpopular policy at this point to have the views that he holds. Will he ever admit that? No chance he'll ever admit that. So, Bill Maher frustrates me quite a lot.
I agree that the foreign policy views he espouses are out of step with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, frankly. But I think his point on what would be generally helpful for electing more Democrats is probably correct in the sense that states like Virginia or Arizona or Pennsylvania that are generally up for grabs are going to be places where, but I don't know, it gets more complicated because an economically populist message is to some extent a message Republicans have themselves adopted. Now, I don't think it depends what we mean by economic populism. Again, I think free markets are better, free trade is better. I want to have lower taxes and less regulation. I'm not going to abolish welfare tomorrow. We can have welfare, it's fine. In fact, I'd rather have more welfare and less regulation, as I've made clear in many of our recent conversations. Yep. I would rather have more welfare and less central planning. The Trump administration, apart from its tech policy, which is a completely hands-off, Reagan-esque 1980s style free market libertarian wet dream, its tech policy is that. Its other industrial policies and economic policies have been broadly way too protectionist for my measures. But that combination might be popular.
Just briefly on that point, Rob, because I know we're almost out of time. I do think that part of the appeal of Bernie Sanders, of AOC, of Mamdani, beyond their geographical constituencies, is that they share with a great proportion of the population unhappiness with the status quo, the belief that the system is rigged against regular people. And I think one of the problems the Democratic Party has had, particularly in last year's election, was the idea that it was, in a sense, defending the status quo. And that was a very unpopular thing to be doing.
Well, one side or the other always has to defend the status quo because one side or the other has to represent the status quo.
Well, maybe the Republicans will be the status quo next time around.
Right-wing influencer Candace Owens continues to spread her unique ideas surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Now, last month, Owens claimed to have discovered Egyptian planes that she says were following and surveilling Kirk up to the day of his death. On Tuesday, she said on her podcast that she believes these planes may have also been tracking Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica.
When it comes to these Egyptian flights, the math on this is indisputable. There is less than a 0.000000001% probability, okay, under random distribution models that these Egyptian planes coincidentally landed around Erica at these times. Like I said, this plane was not just with her in America, it was also tracking her overseas as well. I flagged this because I was alarmed because I thought it was tracking Charlie, and I am telling you that this plane, in addition to Charlie, and primarily actually was tracking Erica.
Okay. After Kirk was shot, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson was arrested and charged with his murder, but Owens has repeatedly said that she does not believe Robinson was the killer. She said that he's involved, but is not the killer. In a recent interview with CNN, she accused the FBI of creating fake messages showing Robinson confessing to the crime.
Owens has also been taking aim at Turning Point USA, the nonprofit founded by Kirk. The other day, she presented her list of lies that she says have been spread by Turning Point, one of the biggest of which has to do with Kirk's support of Israel. Take a look.
Another lie. Charlie never blinked in his support for Israel. Offender Josh Hammer, Bibi Netanyahu, insert Zionist here, many Zionist, Christian Zionist influencers as well. That turned out to be a big lie, an unnecessary lie.
Oh, Candace.
You know what I appreciate? I appreciate the commitment when she wants to go deep dive on something. Everybody else has went to different topics about a subject. She's just gonna go for months on end. And so even the new news about the Egyptian planes, that's out of left field. I was like, wow. It's almost like if you believe
Very
in
characteristic of her.
If you believe in extraterrestrial life and then you don't,
you
watch enough about it, then you will be like me.
You do believe
That's
it.
what I said. You'll believe it. You watch enough about it.
Well,
I mean, I actually
maybe
I
the
want to hear
aliens
her
were
out.
involved in the assassination. Then, I'm happy to hear her out, but she never presents any evidence for the insane things that she says, and we're laughing because it's funny, but it's actually despicable what she's doing. She is suggesting that Erica Kirk or Turning Point USA or both were involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk. That is what she has come this close to saying repeatedly on X in her commentary. She's come very close to saying it. Other people, that Ian Carroll guy who sometimes fills in for her on her show, he has come very close to saying that explicitly, to blaming Israel for the death as well. It's Israel, it's the Jews, it's Erica Kirk, it's Turning Point USA. No, it isn't. We know who it is. It's the guy they arrested who confessed to it in his messages. She's like, oh, those are fabricated. What is the evidence they're fabricated, Candace? She has no evidence. She can't present any evidence for what she says. The killer has a leftist rationale. There's no conspiracy needed here to explain it. The killer was in a relationship with a transgender individual, was very mad about Charlie Kirk's views on transgender issues. This is the transgender killer that conservatives are always talking about. It is that. He's found with the weapon, fingerprints on the weapon. There's no missing puzzle pieces in this, except she just wants it to be about Israel or Erica Kirk or herself. They're trying to silence her. They're trying to keep her down. It's not all about you, girl.
She's somebody who describes herself as a journalist. Whether you agree with that or not is fine. But
that's what I'm saying. I describe myself as a
UFC
pink
fighter?
spotted elephant or something.
Okay, but my point is, journalists, at the very least, maybe she takes some tendencies to do some research and looks into some stuff. Right. So naturally, she's not the only person that looked at those text messages and said, okay, a young Gen Z person is typing like a boomer, spelling out exactly what they're going to do. There were some questions raised around the messages, and not to say that it's not all valid. She's just like, okay, it happened so quickly.
They didn't sound real. They sounded absolutely real to me.
I'm just pointing out what other people were talking about, right? I don't really text too many young people. I mean, I do text some of my nieces and nephews, 14, and it's very much quick half words. So that was very much thoughtful and poetic. She's talking about insider proximity. Some people that she brought up.
People have shorter text. Did you see those? The Epstein emails. The way he writes his emails is insane to me. It's those one words, one word, lowercase, period. It's so weird that he writes that way, but I guess that's a boomer style of writing.
So maybe boomers and Gen Z type the same. But
yeah.
But insider proximity is what she's discussing. So she named some people like Charlie Kirk's pastor or his chief of staff. So she's not only talking about his wife or other, she's just saying within an organization, just like you have disarray when people pass away in a family, unfortunately, that there could be some infighting about what the messaging is moving forward. And she's saying they're not being clear about the truth is not the priority. The messaging might be the priority. And that's her concern about why she's looking into it. She's saying spiritually, operationally, whatever, they're just trying to get a message out as opposed to just telling people the truth. And with somebody with a following as large as Charlie Kirk's was, and somebody who she did say she considered a friend, I think that she has all rights to continue to look into this, even if you think it's ridiculous. I think she just wants to know the answer. Sometimes people also just go crazy when they lose a friend.
Know the answer.
Sometimes people go crazy when they lose a friend and continue to dig in and try to find a different answer than the one they have.
I mean,
that's a valid, natural thing when people pass away.
She's selectively been releasing messages she had with him to try to. I think it is so wrong, and I will criticize anyone doing this on the other side too, trying to say, oh no, he was so supportive of Israel, here's the look, here's our messages. No, he was so against. Look, the man is dead, and that is sad, and he can no longer share what his views are, and it is, I think, really gross for people to be like sharing the text messages they sent or things he said and say, see, this proves my case. I don't like that.
Agreed.
And I think people should stop doing that. And she's doing it as aggressively as anyone else. There's people on the pro-Israel side who've done it too, and I don't think they should do it either.
I agree that she shouldn't be doing that.
The man
and if
can't
she wants
speak
to
for
look
himself
at,
anymore.
Right, it's not for
I'm
her
sorry
to
for that.
try to share her messages, but if
Yeah.
she wants to review or comb through some organizational tensions that she feels may exist within Turning Points, as somebody who I'm assuming is aligned with or follows it in some ways and is one of the swath of America that thinks and aligns themselves with that organization, she's asking questions. And I don't think that's, I mean, she goes down a rabbit hole for sure about a variety of things that I don't agree with. But she can ask questions.
I think she should put up or shut up forever, because she is saying that a grieving widow, she's suggesting, maybe she hasn't
said that exact word. She's saying somebody in the organization. She pointed to the pastor. She pointed to the chief of staff. So even she's not saying that it's the grieving widow. You're using the most dramatic person in the organization. But there's several other people in leadership that may have
around
organizations.
Charlie Kirk may have had a hand in, been responsible for his death. And that is a very serious and dramatic thing. And then when you say, well, give me a shred of evidence that's the case. And she, well, I'm just asking questions. Then she retreats to it. Well, we're not allowed to talk about this. We're not allowed to wonder. Why do you want me silenced? Shut up. Just shut up. Just tell us what the evidence is or stop. That's what I want from her.
It's been a couple weeks now, so I think she could deliver some evidence
or
some breakthrough. I think she should. You're right. It has been a couple weeks to ask questions after you're grieving. If she's alleging that he was her friend, it's fine. But you're right. If you're going to keep pushing these dramatic claims, like, just show what you're looking at that can be shared.
Yeah, I don't understand how anyone can take her seriously at all. Maybe someone can let me know. Send me an email. Let me know at robbie@idon'tcare@gmail.com. A tense couple of exchanges yesterday between President Trump and a reporter during the bilateral meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
The Saudi prince was in Washington yesterday for his first visit to the White House in 7 years. ABC's Mary Bruce asked him about a question about former Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, whom the CIA concluded was murdered in 2018 at the orders of MBS. That question set Trump off. Take a look.
Somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Just moments earlier, Bruce asked Trump about his business interests in Saudi Arabia, and then Trump went on the attack.
Is it appropriate, Mr. President, for your family to be doing business in Saudi Arabia while you're president? Is that a conflict of interest?
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business. But I'll answer your question.
Thank you.
I have nothing to do with the family business. I have left, and when I've devoted 100% of my energy. What my family does is fine. They do business all over. They've done very little with Saudi Arabia, actually. I'm sure they could do a lot. And anything they've done has been very good. That's what we've done. We've built a tremendous business for a long time.
Now, the final straw was a third question from Bruce about the Epstein files. And Trump took it a step further, threatening to pull her network's license.
Mr. President, why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?
You know, it's not the question that I mind. It's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. People are wise to your hoax, and ABC's your company, your crappy company, is one of the perpetrators. And I'll tell you something.
So why not just sign it now?
I think the license should be taken away from ABC because your news is so fake and it's so wrong. And we have a great commissioner, the chairman, who should look at that, because I think when you come in and when you're 97% negative to Trump, and then Trump wins the election in a landslide, that means obviously your news is not credible, and you're not credible as a reporter.
In response to the president's threat, Bruce received a lot of praise from fellow journalists. CNN Brian Stelter took to X, writing, quote, ABC's Mary Bruce deserves a lot of credit for asking these questions. When Trump insulted her news outlet, she calmly responded, but the question is important, sir.
Newsbusters managing editor Curtis Houck disagreed, writing his own post. It was about time a Republican, anyone, didn't even have to be President Trump, tore ABC's Mary Bruce a new one. She truly is the female Jim Acosta, which is not intended as a compliment. Look, Trump loves feuding with reporters. I thought the questions were fine. They're hostile to Trump questions. If he doesn't answer them, he doesn't have to. I couldn't tell what her tone was really from the. Why are you?
Because her tone was not. What? She literally is asking. So if you look at the news headlines around the media, we're talking about conservative outlets, mainstream media. We're talking about Epstein. It's literally from afar when I was traveling. So she asked about the question. Yeah, she asked at a very mild-mannered tone. And you know that. You're very good at saying when the president is doing the most. And this would be one of those instances. She asked a legitimate question about the point at hand. The Saudi Crown Prince was in the Oval Office. And the Biden administration has actively accused the Saudi Crown Prince of ordering the death of a journalist. Okay, so and they're saying no, but that is an appropriate question since the last time we've seen that man in the Oval Office was not until before, or is not since before that he was accused of that. So that would be a natural question of a journalist to ask. And then the business interest parts is a valid question to ask because, as I mentioned, he blurred the line of family business a little bit by having,
I'm not,
building hotels over there in Saudi government-owned territory.
I have no problem with the questions.
So for him to say he's going to pull the license, again, on the heels of the Jimmy Kimmel incident, it seems very inappropriate if he understands his role and what he should not be doing. People are not going to, and then he makes up these polls. 97% of ABC's coverage is negative.
That's not made up.
That's not a real number.
It's not made up.
Who polled it?
Newsbusters.
No, that's a lie.
No, it's not true.
It's 97% Newsbusters? I'm going to pull that poll.
Coverage of Trump is 90% negative according to media watchdog.
No, on ABC, I'm asking. On ABC, is 97% of the coverage negative? That is just,
yes.
He just
I don't know that that's the exact statistic.
I don't know that it is either. And so he's just
I saw this. I saw. You want me to look it up? I do.
I would like you to look it up.
I saw
and I think that
something like that.
She handled herself very well, saying these questions are important, sir. And him calling the network crap and using tones like that is not the way that we would like a president of our country to behave. No.
Look, it can be as negative as it wants. I don't care. But it's, Media Research Center finds 92% of major network evening news coverage of Donald Trump during his first 100 days in office was negative. That's according to the Media Research Center. It's a right-of-center publication. So
right-of-center publication.
So you might disagree with it, but
right,
92%.
About? And he's also the numbers of it. And it wasn't.
That wasn't for ABC specifically.
Right. So he's just saying anything, and so he's harassing this girl. She literally has a job now that all the media organizations done got kicked up out of the Pentagon. Can't even report on what's going on over there. He's literally trying to throw them off of television and revoke licenses because he doesn't like what they're saying. As somebody who operates in a role as a journalist, sometimes operates in a role of an analyst and a commentator. Other times, you can understand why this dialogue is wildly inappropriate when that girl, Mary, was just in there trying to report and ask the real most pressing questions, which is the actual job of a journalist. Yes?
Maybe.
No. It's not. This is crazy.